COVID Tale 2, The Businesswoman by LT. I walked to my living room window, a nervous habit, and looked down onto the street below. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, took the place of my relief. They were there. My colleagues, a small group of them, led by Tanya. They were standing on the sidewalk, their heads tilted back, their still vacant faces staring up at my high-rise. They knew they had tracked me or got my address from the workplace. The supervisor must have released it to them to follow me. Of course, my building, my sanctuary, was already compromised, or rather it was never secured from them in the first place. I pulled back from the window, a cold wave of panic washing over me. They were just standing there, a silent, patient hunting party, waiting for me to make a move. I took a shaky breath as someone passed by them heading into the building, and in a terrifying, synchronized motion, they turned and followed them inside. My heart hammered against my ribs, a panicked drumbeat in the sudden deafening silence of my apartment. I grabbed a small duffel bag and shoved in clothes, cash, and my herbal remedies. My eyes fell on the backpack I used for hiking. I unzipped the side pocket and took out a can of pepper spray and a small stun gun, a precaution I'd bought years ago and never thought I'd use. I was ready. I was not going to be a victim. I crept to my front door, listening. The elevator dinged on my floor. I froze. The sound of their footsteps was a low, heavy drag coming from the hallway. My plan was to slip out, race down the stairwell, and hopefully beat them to the ground floor. I opened the door, a silent, slow crack, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Two people, a man and a woman from a different department, were standing perfectly still in the hallway, as if they had been waiting for me. Their flat, empty eyes were locked on mine. They hadn't said a word. They were just there. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. They were in the building. They were on my floor. I was completely trapped, and this part of the game had just begun. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. The hallway was blocked. The stairwell was a possible ambush. The elevator was a death trap. I had to think like a survivor, not a victim. I wasn't going to try and fight a whole group of them at once. I had to turn the cat and mouse game into a strategic chess match. My eyes fell on a small, portable stove I used for camping, sitting on my kitchen counter. An idea, wild and desperate, ignited in my mind. They were predictable, a collective with a shared purpose. They were drawn to conformity and order, and they were also drawn to a threat against that order. A loud disruption, a chaotic signal, would be their call to action. I could use their collective nature against them. I ran to the stove, plugged it in, and turned it on high. I grabbed a small, dirty rag from under my sink and soaked it in a bottle of cooking oil. I placed the rag on the stovetop, the fumes instantly filling the air. The rag sizzled, then started to smoke, a thin, acrid line curling into the air. I knew it was a dangerous gamble, but I had no other choice. I snatched my duffel bag and took a deep breath, my eyes watering from the smoke. My apartment was filling with it, the air thick and choking. I took out my pepper spray and stun gun, holding them tight in my trembling hands. I crept back to the front door, my ear pressed against the cool wood. The shuffling sound in the hallway was gone. The silence was a new kind of dread. Suddenly, a high-pitched wail erupted from the hall fire alarm. I flinched, but it was exactly what I had hoped for. The smoke from my apartment had reached the alarm. The alarm was a siren, a beacon of chaos in a world of controlled order. Their collective minds would be drawn to it. I waited. I could hear their footsteps, a frantic, heavy stampede running towards the blaring alarm. They were all going to the source of the chaos. This was my chance. I opened the door, a slow, silent crack, and peered out. The hallway was empty. The sound of the alarm was a deafening shriek. The fire door to the stairwell was swinging open, the footsteps echoing down the stairs. Nobody was around for now. I slipped out of my apartment, my feet making no sound on the carpet, and raced to the stairwell. I went in, pulling the heavy fire door shut behind me, plunging me into a dark and silent world, the muffled sound of the alarm my only companion. I was 2 flights down, moving quickly, when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't the sound of running. It was a slow, deliberate creak from the floor above me. I froze. They had left a guard. A man, one of my former colleagues named Ben, was standing on the landing a floor above me. He was standing perfectly still, his back to the wall, his flat, empty eyes staring directly at me. He hadn't been drawn to the alarm. He was just waiting. They had anticipated a diversion. They were smarter than I had given them credit for. He took a step down, his movement slow and fluid. His face, once so full of laughter and joy, was now a serene, blank canvas. The sight of him, so calm and so terrifyingly wrong, filled me with a primal fear. "We just want to help you," he said, his voice a low, chilling whisper. I didn't answer. I didn't have time. I raised the pepper spray and pointed it at his face. I pressed the button and a cloud of hot, stinging mist erupted from the can. He reacted with a terrifying speed, a blur, as he dodged the spray. It wasn't human. His eyes, now filled with a dark, furious rage, were on me. The serene mask was gone, replaced by a raw, predatory hunger. He lunged. I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I swung the stun gun, a desperate, clumsy blow. The metal tip of the stun gun connected with his chest, and a high-pitched zap filled the air. His body stiffened, his muscles contracting, but a low, guttural growl escaped his lips. The stun gun only seemed to make him angry. He wasn't like a normal person. The electricity didn't affect him the way it was supposed to. He reached out, his long, slender fingers grabbing my arm. His grip was impossibly strong, an iron vice. I screamed, not in pain, but in sheer terror. His face was inches from mine, his eyes a black, bottomless pit of a terrifying hunger. His breath was cold and reeked of something metallic. "It will feel good," he rasped, his voice a low, broken sound. "Just give in." I didn't have time to think. I brought my knee up, hitting him hard in the groin. He didn't even flinch. I was a puppet, and he was the puppet master. He was going to drag me back to them. In a last, desperate act, I leaned back, using all my weight, and threw us both down the stairs. We tumbled, a clumsy, terrifying mess of limbs and terror. I landed hard on the floor below, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. I scrambled to my feet, my body aching, my head throbbing, and looked back. Ben was already standing, his body a silent, terrifying silhouette against the pale light of the stairwell. He was coming for me. I ran down the stairs, 3 at a time, my body on fire, the sound of his heavy, methodical footsteps thudding behind me. I hit the ground floor, my legs shaking, and burst through the emergency exit. The cold night air hit my face, a shocking, beautiful relief. I was outside. I ran across the empty parking lot, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I had reached the end of the lot, a dark, empty street that led into the city. I was free. I had escaped my home, but I felt like I had lost everything. I was alone, on the run, an absconder in a world that had become a battlefield. I had won the fight, but the war was just beginning. I ran until my lungs screamed, the cold night air a sharp blade in my chest. The city streets were a terrifying blur of motion and silence. I was a stray in a world that had become a hunting ground. My only hope was the train station. I didn't know how far it was or if I would make it, but I had to try. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my clothes were ripped and dirty. I was a mess, a stark contrast to the perfect, sterile world around me. As I moved down the street, I noticed the cars. They were all driving at the exact same speed. They didn't slow down for crosswalks, they didn't honk, and they didn't turn with a sudden, jerky motion. They moved as one, a single, fluid entity. A man on a street corner, a businessman in a perfect suit, was standing with a vacant stare, his hands in his pockets. As I walked by, his head slowly, robotically turned to follow me. His eyes, dark and flat, were like 2 empty pits. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I just kept moving, my heart a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I finally found a bus stop, a small, glass-covered shelter on a dark street. I slid inside, my body trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and fear. The bus arrived a few minutes later, its doors hissing open with a loud mechanical sigh. I got on, paid with the last of the cash in my pocket, and found a seat in the back. The bus was a microcosm of the new world. Some people were unnervingly hyper, their eyes wide and bright, their mouths a silent, perpetual smile. Others were sullen and aggressive, their faces a mask of sullen anger. And others were just still, their bodies rigid, their gazes fixed on a distant, unseen point. I looked at the people on the bus, and a cold dread washed over me. I wasn't safe here. This was just another cage. As the bus moved, the city lights a blur outside the window. I saw him. A man from accounting, one I'd worked with for years. He was sitting in the front, his head turned, his eyes fixed on the empty seat next to him. I knew his name, but I couldn't remember it. He had a faint red mark on the back of his neck, a brand of his surrender. I pulled my jacket up to my chin, my body a tight coil of tension. I didn't dare look at him. I just sat, my eyes fixed on the floor, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I was a mouse in a den of cats, and I had nowhere to run. The bus finally stopped at the train station, a large modern building of glass and steel. I ran off the bus and into the building, my body on fire, my legs screaming in objection. The station was a madhouse of people, a sea of blank faces and hurried footsteps. I found the ticket counter and bought a ticket with my remaining cash, my hands trembling as I took the ticket from the machine. I looked up, and a woman from my marketing department was standing behind me, her eyes locked on mine. She didn't say a word. She just smiled, a small, cold, terrifying smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had the mark too, the one on her wrist, a faint red line. She was just there. I turned and ran, my body a blur of motion, weaving through the crowd. I found a bench in a secluded corner of the station and sat down, my body trembling. I was surrounded by them. They were everywhere. They were in the crowds, their faces a mask of calm. They were in the quiet corners, their eyes watching me with a cold, terrifying hunger. I was a single drop of clean water in an ocean of poison. I had nowhere to run. The train arrived with a loud hiss of compressed air, its doors opening with a slow, mechanical sigh. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked toward the train, my body a tight coil of tension. I got on and found a seat by the window, my eyes scanning the faces of the people on the train. They were all the same empty eyes, the same placid expressions, the same quiet, menacing calm. I was trapped. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they could hear it. I was a stranger in my own life, a lost lamb in a world that had become a lion's den. The train left the station with a gentle lurch, and I watched the city lights fade into the darkness. I was on my way to my aunt's city, a beacon of hope in a world of madness. The soft hum of the train and the rhythmic click of the wheels on the tracks were a lullaby of temporary safety. My heart was still pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had escaped the office building and my apartment building, but now I was on a moving trap, a sealed metal tube with 100 strangers. I didn't know if they were a comfort or a new kind of threat. I looked around the train car, my eyes scanning the passengers. The man across the aisle was humming a low, tuneless melody, his eyes closed. A woman 2 rows ahead was staring out the window, her expression serene and without a hint of emotion. Their movements were subtle and unsettling. They were too quiet, too still. I was a solitary island in a sea of them. My head throbbed and I felt a wave of nausea. I had to get to my aunt's house. It was my only hope. It had to be a place of safety. My mind, once a place of order and logic, was now a frantic engine of survival. I had a choice to make. I could sit in fear, a clear target, or I could blend in. I had seen them, my colleagues, and their strange, vacant mannerisms. I could mimic them. I could become one of them. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small first aid kit I always carried. I took out a plain white bandage, peeled off the backing, and stuck it to my upper arm. It was a fake brand, a symbol of a lie. I then took a deep breath and began my performance. I let the tension in my face go, letting my jaw hang slightly ajar. I widened my eyes, letting them take on a glassy, unfocused sheen. I stared straight ahead, a blank mask of uninterest on my face, I was no longer Amelia, the quick-witted professional. I was a vessel, a follower. A woman in the seat across from me looked at me, her face a cold, judgmental stare. I simply stared back, a vacant smile on my lips. She looked away, a flicker of something that might have been recognition in her eyes. It was working. I was one of them. The tension in the train car seemed to melt away, replaced by a dull, unthreatening silence. I had become a part of the herd. Just as a feeling of dread started to wash over me, a feeling of being a prisoner in my own body, a train attendant approached me. She was a woman in a crisp, clean uniform, her face a perfect porcelain mask of professionalism. "Ticket, ma'am," she asked, her voice a low, soothing hum. I handed her my ticket, and she took it, her eyes fixed on my arm. She looked at the bandage. A faint, almost imperceptible frown crossed her face. "That's a new brand, isn't it?" she asked, her voice a low, searching whisper. My heart hammered against my ribs. She knew. She was testing me. I didn't say a word. I just stared at her, a vacant smile on my face. Her eyes narrowed. "I just need to check if you're okay," she said, her voice a bit more strained. "The new ones. They sometimes have a delayed reaction." Her hand shot out, her long fingers reaching for the bandage on my arm. I knew in that moment that she wasn't going to check if I was okay. She was going to tear off the bandage and expose me. I shot out of my seat, my eyes wide with a cold fury. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, my voice high and strained. "Now!" I didn't wait for her to respond. I just sprinted down the aisle, my body a blur of motion. I could hear her footsteps behind me, a quick, even rhythm that was a shocking contrast to the heavy, dragging footsteps of the infected. She was human, and she was going to expose me. I slammed the bathroom door shut behind me, locking it with a loud, metallic click. I took a deep, ragged breath, my body shaking with a mixture of terror and relief. The train attendant's voice, a cold, clinical sound, came from the other side of the door. "Ma'am, you need to come out. It's for your own good. We just want to help you." The words were a bitter mockery of the phrase my colleagues had used. I didn't answer. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob, my eyes scanning the tiny space. I could hear her on the other side, her body pressed against the door. I had to do something. I had to fight. I unscrewed the top of a small, glass bottle of air freshener that was sitting on the sink. The liquid, a powerful chemical scent, filled the air. I held the bottle in my hand, my heart a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I took a deep breath, and with a sudden, forceful push, I opened the door. The train attendant, who had been leaning against the door, stumbled into the bathroom. Before she could react, I threw the contents of the bottle in her face. She screamed, her hands flying to her eyes. The liquid, a powerful acid, burned her skin. I didn't wait. I hit her hard in the gut with my fist, and she stumbled backward, landing on the toilet with a loud grunt. She was dazed, blinded by the acid. I took the stun gun from my bag and pressed it against her neck. The zap was a loud, high-pitched sound. She stiffened, her body convulsing, and then she went limp, falling to the ground with a soft thud. She was unconscious. She was alive. I had won. But the fight was far from over. I looked at the woman, her body a crumpled mess on the floor, and I felt a wave of cold horror. I had just fought a human being, a woman who was just trying to do her job. But she was a part of the system now, a part of the world that was trying to destroy me. I took a deep breath, my face a cold, emotionless mask. I went back to my seat, my movement slow and deliberate, my face a perfect vacant mask. I sat down and stared straight ahead, a part of the herd, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I was a monster now. I had to be. It was the only way to survive. The train arrived at the station with a gentle hiss of air. The doors opened with a soft click. I stood up, my body aching, and walked off the train. The air was cold and fresh, a beautiful, terrifying breath of a new life. A man was standing by the entrance to the bus station, his eyes on me. He was a conductor, and he was staring at me with a cold, knowing look on his face. He looked at my face, then at the train, Then at my face again, he knew. I was exposed. I had to run. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted out of the station, my body a blur of motion, my legs screaming in protest. The man shouted something after me, but I didn't look back. I just ran. I ran into the city, feeling like an outlaw in my own life, an animal in a world of monsters. I was lost, scared, and alone. I finally came across the bus I needed at a stop by a diner and boarded. The bus ride was a silent, agonizing eternity. I was a statue in a sea of them, my hands clenched in my lap, my body a tight coil of tension. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of fear through me. Every time the bus stopped, I held my breath, waiting for a colleague to board, for the game to start again. But no one did. I arrived at my aunt's neighborhood, a sprawling landscape of quiet suburbs and darkened streets. I got off the bus and began to walk, my heels screaming in an aching objection. The houses were all dark, the curtains all drawn. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows. The stillness was a new kind of horror, a silent, empty calm that was more terrifying than the chaos of the city. I was alone in a world of ghosts. I found her house, a small, cozy bungalow with a wreath on the front door. The porch light was on, casting a warm, welcoming glow. I ran to the door, my body on fire, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I hammered on the door, my voice a broken whisper. "Aunt Tabitha! It's me! I'm here!" The door opened and she was there. Aunt Tabitha, her face, a soft, kind map of wrinkles, was filled with a deep concern. She pulled me into a tight, warm embrace. Her body was soft and warm, a stark contrast to the cold, hard bodies of the people I had been fighting. Her scent was a mix of lavender and cinnamon, a comforting balm to my frayed nerves. I felt a wave of relief so profound I nearly passed out. I was safe. I was home. She pulled back and looked at me, her eyes filled with a gentle pity. "Oh, Amelia," she said, her voice a low, sweet melody. "Look at you. You're a mess. What happened?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, my eyes welling up with tears. She took my hand and led me into the kitchen, the warm air and the scent of brewing tea a shock to my system. She sat me down at her kitchen table and handed me a warm mug of chamomile tea. The feeling of the warm ceramic on my cold hands was a small, beautiful miracle. "Now," she said, pulling a chair up and sitting across from me, "tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave a single thing out." And I did. I told her about the office, the quiet judgment, the stairs. I told her about Mr. Evans, his cold, calculated threats. I told her about Tonya, my friend who had chosen a life of weaves and manicures over a life of freedom. I told her about the pursuit, the empty stares, the terrifying rage in their eyes. I told her about the train, the horror of being a lone human in a sea of them. I ranted, my voice trembling with a raw, broken fury. She listened, her eyes filled with a deep, sympathetic understanding. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She just listened, a warm, reassuring presence in a world that had become a cold, empty place. As I finished my story, a long, tired sigh escaping my lips, she took her spoon and began to stir her tea. The sound of the small ceramic spoon clinking against the side of the mug was a quiet, rhythmic sound, a soft melody in the quiet kitchen. "It's a terrifying thing," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "The world has lost its mind. It's a shame. You know, your mama always told you to be alternative, to be more herbalistic, and she was right. But the trick, my dear, is to balance the two, the old with the new, modern medicine with the earth." She looked at me, her eyes a dark, knowing sea of understanding. A small, chilling smirk pulled at the corner of her lips. The clinking of the spoon became a little more rhythmic, a little more deliberate. She stood up, her movements fluid and purposeful. "More tea, honey?" she said, her voice a little too sweet. "No, thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Something was off. The smile, the way she was moving, the rhythmic clinking of the spoon. I knew. I had been a fool. I had walked straight into another trap. She walked to the stove, her back to me, and as she did, she slowly reached into the pocket of her apron. The mug in her hand was a weapon now, a symbol of a betrayal so profound it made my stomach churn. She turned, her face a perfect, empty mask of serene calm. She threw the boiling tea in her hand at my face, a blur of motion. I screamed, my hands flying up to protect my eyes, the hot liquid scalding my skin, and before I could react further, she was on me. She tackled me to the floor, her body, once so soft and warm, a hard, unyielding weight on my own. I struggled, but her grip was like a vice. She was impossibly strong, her face inches from mine, her eyes filled with a cold, terrifying hunger. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a syringe, the sharp needle a gleaming threat in the dim light of the kitchen. I fought with a desperate primal rage. I kicked, I punched, I screamed. I was a wild animal, a cornered fox fighting for its life. She was a calm, calculated machine, her movements precise, her eyes fixed on my neck. The syringe was inches from my skin. I could feel the cold, sharp tip of the needle. This was it. This was the end. My fight was over. Just then, the front door burst open with a loud wooden crash. A woman, her face a grim mask of fury, ran into the kitchen. My mother, I screamed, a cry of pure relief. I had thought she was gone. I had thought she might have been forced to become one of them. She wasn't. My mother, a woman who had always taught me to be strong, ran to me. She didn't hesitate. She threw her body at Tabitha, a raging force of nature. She was a mother fighting for her child, and she hit Tabitha with a ferocity so potent it took her by surprise. Tabitha screamed a sharp, broken sound, and my mother hit her again. My mother's fists were a blur of action, a flurry of pure, unadulterated rage. Tabitha crumpled to the floor, her body a limp, unconscious heap. I lay on the floor, gasping for breath, my body aching, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. My mother knelt beside me, her hands trembling as she pulled me into a tight, warm embrace. Her body was a comforting, familiar presence. She was home. She was safe. I was finally truly safe. We sat there, a mother and a daughter in a world gone mad, our bodies a mess of dirt and tears, our hearts a mix of pure, unadulterated joy and a cold, chilling horror. We had made it. For now. As me and my mother drove down the road toward her home, I asked her why she had come to Tabitha's house. She replied, "She invited me to come by yesterday, probably to ambush me too. Good thing I came today." Then she asked, "So baby, tell me what's been going on with you." And I began to tell her the story of how me, a badass businesswoman, went on the run to save her bodily autonomy, and how I didn't give up no matter how shamed, no matter how demeaned or beaten down I got. No matter how bad it got, I stayed strong like she raised me to be. And she was proud of me. So was I.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And stay tuned for the next one.